Very good. Then I would like to call to order the new board member orientation of the North County Transit District for January 21 of 2021. And I will ask Anthony Flores, the clerk of the board, to call roll.
Yes, sir. Board Member Sanchez. Board Chair Krantz.
Here.
Board Member Contreras. Board Member Contreras. Board Member McNamara. Board Member Desmond. Board Member Quirk.
Here.
Board Member Edson.
Present.
Board Member Jenkins. Board Member Botpatal. Board Member Von Wilpert.
I'm present.
Board Alternate Keem. Board Alternate Hines. Board Alternate Melendez. Board Alternate Morosco. Board Alternate Lawson Remmer. Board Alternate Gasterland. Board Alternate Harless. Board Alternate Musgrove.
I am present. Thank you.
Board Alternate Acosta.
I'm here, thanks.
That's the roll, sir.
Okay, thank you. And this part of the meeting used to be more germane when we were gathering in the boardroom of the bunker at on Mission in Oceanside, but there are still some folks there. So the clerk of the board, Anthony, will now provide a safety briefing and review evacuation procedures.
Yes, sir. For those that are present here in the boardroom, in event of emergency, I will dial 911. In the event of an evacuation, please exit the building using the stairs. Do not use the elevator. We have fire extinguishers and fire alarms on each floor of this building and a portable defibrillator located on the first floor. We also have staff on hand trained on CPR procedures. That concludes our safety brief.
Thank you. And everybody zooming in from home, I hope you know how to get out of your house if there's an emergency. So with that, the next question is whether there are any changes to the agenda.
There are none, sir.
Any public comments?
No, sir.
Okay, then this is the opportunity I have to welcome you all to the NCT Board of Directors. And I'm going to read to you part of our mission statement, our governing mission statement for the board. And it states, the NCTD board is responsible for representing the citizens of North San Diego County and providing strategic and policy level leadership to ensure that NCTD meets the public transportation needs of the region in a full, safe, time, and cost-effective manner. And your appointment to the board was made possible by your having won an election. Yay. And each of your respective jurisdictions has decided to appoint you to represent your community on the NCTD board. And so we also all recognize that aside from the County Board of Supervisors, your positions at your cities are part-time jobs. You have full-time jobs that you generally also have to perform for. And so you don't necessarily have the expertise to run a railroad and transit system. And so the governing statement specifies that our role as setting strategic direction and policy. And we provide strategic direction and policy via adopting ordinances and board policies and the approval of the budgets. The board is responsible for hiring two positions, much like your city, where there's a city manager and a city attorney. We hire the executive director and the general counsel. And they manage the day-to-day operations and ensure that the strategic direction and policies approved by the board are successfully implemented. We employ these positions via employment agreements, and we manage their performance through annual reviews. As board members, we are responsible for supporting NCTD's mission of providing public transportation that is safe, reliable, and cost effective. And I'm sure that you would not be here if you did not care about the well-being of the North County Transit District and support its governing statement. Again, I look forward to working with each of you, and I recognize that the transit needs across North County are different. And it was one of the most important things that I had to learn when I first took my seat on the North County Transit District Board, is that the way the needs for public transit in Oceanside, Vista, San Marcos, and Escondido are different than they are in Del Mar, Solana Beach, Encinitas, and Carlsbad. Encinitas is very auto-centric, and so our transit needs are entirely different than the city of Oceanside or San Marcos. So it presents some challenges in terms of putting on the hat of a North County Transit District board member and addressing the needs of the region. But it's important to recognize that we have some different needs in each of our communities. So for our orientation today, there are two informational items. Karen Tukulski is the Chief Administrative Officer, and she will review item number 1.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Kranz. Welcome to everyone. I know that I speak for all my colleagues when I say that we are all looking forward to working with all of our new board members and alternates, and we appreciate the leadership that you're going to help bring to us here at the district. So I'm going to start off with a little bit of an overview about NCTD and then a couple of other informational slides on my division and the Office of the Executive Director. And then from there, I'm going to be turning it over to my colleagues, so you'll get a chance to hear from all of us and at least see us virtually and learn a little bit about our different divisions and the roles that we play here at NCTD. So I'm just going to start off with a brief background. A brief background about North County Transit District. The district was originally formed in 1975. The name back then was actually the North San Diego County Transit Development Board. So we were actually quite grateful when 30 years later we were renamed North County Transit District, because that certainly is much shorter and a little easier to roll off the tongue. Since inception, however, our mission has been to deliver safe, convenient, reliable, and user-friendly public transportation services. On this next slide, you'll see just some quick facts about NCTD and our services. My colleagues will be telling you a lot more about this in detail as they share information about their respective divisions with you. So I'm just going to provide some very high-level overview bullet points. We do have 5 modes of transit. On the rail side, we have our Coaster Commuter Rail and the Sprinter Hybrid Rail. Those services are currently managed via agreement with Bombardier Transportation. On the bus side, we have our Breeze Fixed Route, our Flex Demand Response, and our Lyft ADA Paratransit services. The bus contract is currently managed via agreement with MV Transportation. In a typical year, which definitely 2020 was not with the COVID-19 pandemic, we have about 10.4 million passenger trips each year. Our operating budget for this fiscal year 2021, is $127 million, and our capital improvement program, or our CIP, is $39.5 million. As an agency, NCTD is responsible for 82 directional miles of right-of-way that support both freight and passenger rail operations. We also have a very robust fleet of transit revenue vehicles supporting all of our different modes. Again, you can see the information here, and I'm not going to read it off to you, as I know you'll get to hear more about this from my Chief Operations Officer colleagues in both bus and rail. So like any organization, We rely on our personnel to help us achieve our mission and fulfill our services to our customers. This slide gives you just a short glimpse of what the staffing looks like between our direct and contractor employees. We have a total of approximately 856 employees, and the pie chart on the left shows you the breakdown between our direct staffing and our bus, rail, and facilities contractors. And then the pie chart on the right shows you a breakdown of the NCT direct staff as they relate to the different divisions that we have here within NCTD. So I'm now going to provide a brief overview of the Office of the Executive Director. As you heard from Chair Krantz, Mr. Tucker is hired under the terms of an employment agreement and has a wide range of responsibilities. Well, the list here provides a little bit of an overview. It certainly doesn't give you the full breadth of all the things that Mr. Tucker does on a daily basis. We could probably have 30 slides of different activities that these simple bullets actually translate to in terms of his day-to-day work. But as the executive director, he is responsible for all aspects of our activities of operation, subject to the policy direction, of course, from the board of directors. In addition to general personnel oversight responsibilities, he has direct responsibility for the supervision management of our division chiefs like myself. He's responsible for ensuring that the district establishes key goals and initiatives for the board's review and approval on an annual basis. And of course, as we also stressed earlier via Chair Krantz as well, the importance of fiscal management via development and maintenance of an annual budget. As also noted, the direction from the executive director is provided by the board either as a whole, directly from the chair, or from duly authorized board committees. In Mr. Tucker's office, there's a senior strategic planner. Her name's Katie Persons. For those who will be participating in our regular board meeting this afternoon or observing, you'll actually get a chance to hear from Ms. Persons. She has a big job. She helps Mr. Tucker do a lot of work in terms of all of our strategic efforts, which can be planning and support for both short and long range activities, a range of different projects, and coordinating as well with Sandag and LoSan on different capital projects. So she has quite a full plate and has a wide range of activities that she engages in. Not on the slide, but also someone I definitely want to call out is our executive coordinator, Suhail Rodriguez. She probably has what I think is a much harder job than many of us here, in that she's responsible for helping Mr. Tucker keep all of his work organized and managing his calendar, which with all of his responsibilities is certainly no small feat. So as you move forward in your roles here with the board, you probably will have contact with Ms. Rodriguez, and I would encourage you, if you're trying to reach Mr. Tucker or get any information, you should certainly feel free to reach out to her directly once you start getting to know her, as she will absolutely be able to help you and provide you with great assistance. So I'm now going to provide just a short overview of my division, the Administrative Services Division. There are 4 departments within the Administrative Services Division: Administrative Services, Customer Experience, Human Resources, and Safety Oversight. In addition to the department managers that I supervise directly, I also have an instructional design manager reporting to me. He helps provide services to both staff and contractors in terms of the design and management of our critical training programs, and also a senior project analyst who provides capital project delivery support for our rail and bus operations teams. In addition, I do also serve as the NCTD's Equal Employment Opportunity Officer. So I'm going to give you a short overview of each of the departments within my division. The Administrative Services Department is led by Anthony Flores, who's our Manager of Administration and also serves as Clerk of the Board. As such, you will get to know Anthony well. You will probably have his phone number and his email memorized in no time at all. And you certainly should feel free to reach out to him for any needs that you as board members or board alternates may have. He is always readily available and eager to assist. So in overseeing his day-to-day duties of the administration department, they provide general administrative support, do a lot of work on policies and procedures and records management, all of which are very important to NCTD and to our public in our role as a public agency. Customer service is another very important department here at NCTD. Brian Burkett is our Director of Customer Experience. You'll also get the opportunity as you move forward to get to know Brian, if not personally, then certainly via interactions with customers. I often encourage all of our board members that when you receive email communications, phone calls, or questions about NCTD services from any of your residents in your communities, that you do please encourage or forward them over to Brian Burkett so that we can then help you provide answers to them. There's truly no one I have ever met that has more compassion and concern for customers and truly believes in our NCTD's mission here to the public. So please do not hesitate to ever send any questions from your residents over to him so that we can help get them the answers that they have. As a department, we have 3 retail ticket offices, one in Oceanside, one in Vista, and one in Escondido. Those are at our 3 main transit centers. Those retail ticket offices do have walk-up services where customers can come for one-to-one services with our customer service agents. We also have a call center that operates 7 days a week where individuals can call in for assistance, as well as an ADA eligibility certification center. That office is located out at the Escondido Transit Center and serves to provide a location where individuals who are interested in applying for eligibility to utilize our ADA paratransit lift services would come for an assessment. Currently, that office is closed. We're not doing in-person assessments, but when it's open, that's another area of responsibility for staffing the desk that our customer service team handles. We also take great pride in our customer feedback program. We have different ways that our customers can provide feedback to us. It can be through the internet, on the phone, via letters, a range of different ways, and we do take their feedback seriously and do take our obligation to respond to them very seriously as well. So Brian and his team are leaders in making sure that we are getting back to our customers and addressing their concerns. We also have a mystery rider program, which operates much like a mystery shopper or mystery diner program. We have an independent contractor who goes out 4 times a year, and they ride all of the different modes with anonymous staff. And that gives us a chance to really have feedback from people out in the field telling us how our services are coming along from the customer perspective. We also handle rider guides and schedules. We do those twice a year, once in April and once in October, and those are the printed tools that provide our customers with information about our bus and rail services. So within the Human Resources Department, we also have a broad range of activities, much like you would see at any other human resources department. Certainly, we are responsible for comprehensive personnel management. We also have responsibility for both employee and labor relations. Currently, there are 2 groups of NCTD employees who are unionized. They are both unionized via agreements with the SMART Union, the Sheet Metal, Air Rail, and Transportation Workers Union. Very long name, again, why we call them SMART Union for short, much easier to say. But we have those 2 groups that we do have agreements with, and those individuals are represented by those unions. Our HR department also takes broad responsibility for ensuring that our employees fill out all of their Form 700 forms and fulfill their ethics responsibility as public employees. They will also work directly with Anthony as our clerk of the board on getting any information for those Form 700s that we need from our board members and alternates. Overseeing workers' compensation for our employees is another important activity, and then drug and alcohol program management as well. So we are responsible for compliance with both Federal Transit Administration and Federal Railroad Administration drug and alcohol program requirements for both our staff and our contractors. So in addition to handling the aspect for our direct staff, our HR team also collaborates with our operations contractors to make sure that they are properly fulfilling those important requirements as well. And then lastly, but certainly not least, the security department is also part of the administrative services team. So we take the safety and security of our facilities and our customers and all of our services very important here at NCTD. In terms of our security model, we have 2 primary pillars. One which is directly via agreements called memorandums of understanding with local law enforcement agencies to help us provide the enforcement piece of the different activities that need to go on out in the field. So we have a MOU with the San Diego Sheriff's Department that provides us with services for 7 deputies and 1 sergeant. And then we also have MOUs with the City of Oceanside and City of Escondido Police Departments. So the Sheriff's Department provides services all over our service area, heavily focused on the rail lines and the right-of-way just by the nature of the different activities and needs that we have for their services. And the Oceanside and Escondido Police Departments have services that provide directly at the transit center. So they provide patrol at our Oceanside and Escondido transit centers and will help us provide security and law enforcement as needed for those locations. We also have on staff 9 CC technicians, control center technicians. That's what that stands for. They provide closed circuit television monitoring services. So we have cameras located throughout the service area, heavily focused, of course, on our transit centers, rail stations, and various buildings where we have our staff located. So they are constantly monitoring on a 24/7 basis those various cameras to keep an eye out for anything that may be of a concern out in the field. And following up as needed accordingly, bringing in law enforcement if that's required based on the circumstance that they see. Security Department also is responsible for emergency management, which includes the development and maintenance of our emergency response plan and our system security and emergency preparedness plans. Both of those vital documents are updated on a minimum an annual basis, and we train to them accordingly with all of our staff so that they understand what their responsibilities are in terms of security and emergency management. So that concludes my summary of our brief introduction and my division. I'm happy to take any questions at this time if there are any. Anthony, I don't know if we have any questions. All right, super. Well, again, thank you all and welcome. With that, I'm going to turn things over to my colleague, Tracy Foster. She is our Chief Development Officer, and she's going to tell you about her Development Services Division. Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. It's a pleasure to meet all of the new board members, and I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about the division that I lead, Development Services. Next slide, please. So within Development Services, there are 4 departments: the Facilities and Project Management, Real Estate, Rail Engineering, and Maintenance of Way. The Facilities and Project Management team, along with the Rail Engineering team, is led by our Director of Engineering and Maintenance, Scott Luschke. Real Estate is managed by our Real Estate Manager, Beth Freeman, and the Maintenance of Way department is managed by Brian Helms. Also within the department, there is a Senior Planner who reports directly into me, who assists with a variety of project study reports that turn into projects that later on other members of the team will manage, and also assists with development opportunities of our real estate assets. The Facilities and Project Management department, the facilities team does typical facilities work with the maintenance, cleaning, and repairs of all of our facilities. The facilities that we do maintain are 2 administrative offices. That's known as our General Administrative Office located in Oceanside off of Mission, along with our Tremont facility, which is down at Oceanside Transit Center. We also have 2 bus maintenance facilities known as East and West Division. Our West Division is located in Oceanside and East Division out in Escondido. We have 3 rail maintenance facilities. First is our Coaster Operations Facility located on Camp Pendleton, Sprinter Operations Facility that's in Escondido, and then we also lease a facility in Oceanside for our Maintenance of Way facility. In addition to these sites, the facilities team also manages the maintenance of all of the rail stations and transit centers and all of the bus stops within the system. All of this maintenance activity is done through outsourced contracts, primarily through Bombardier, who is our rail operator, MV for our bus maintenance facilities. And then we have a host of specialty agreements. So your HVAC and plumbing and electrical type contracts that we call our specialty agreements for all of the other work. So the team also does project management to ensure that the district's assets are in a state of good repair. Next slide, please. We're on real estate. The real estate team manages all the real property owned by NCTD. That's 62 miles of right-of-way and miscellaneous parcels. And that the right-of-way was acquired by NCTD from Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe in the early 90s. That's ATSF, now known as BNSF. And the real estate that we own from County Line, Orange County Line, down to San Diego. From Camp Pendleton, through Camp Pendleton, we operate under an easement from the United States government. And then again, we own the property from Oceanside through Del Mar. And then from Del Mar down to San Diego, MTS is actually the property owner. But as we're the operator of the rail, we do have responsibility for the right-of-way and participate in various permitting activities that occur in that portion of the right-of-way. So we manage all of the leases and licenses and easements. We have over 1,200 agreements, and approximately 216 of those agreements are revenue producing. And you may be asking why the difference between only 216 revenue producing agreements. But when we acquired the property from ATSF in the early 90s, all of those agreements came over to us. So they may have paid a fee at that time, but when they came over to us, not all of them had revenue associated with it. But moving forward, the district does have a cost recovery fee schedule, and we have board policies that provide for and require us to charge fair market value for the property. And so for these revenue producing agreements, we generate approximately 1.9 million annually for the district. The real estate team also is responsible for the vending and concessions agreements. And as I mentioned before, there's a permitting process for anyone who wants to work on the right-of-way or access any of our property for any reason, requires a permit to get out onto the right-of-way or onto one of our properties. And the real estate department manages that process to ensure that everyone going out onto our properties are out there in a safe manner that will have no impact on operations. Once all of the permitting is authorized, the team then authorizes flagging protection, again, to ensure that the roadway workers out on the right-of-way are working safely and protected, and any signal support services that are provided by Bombardier. Next slide, please. Our rail engineering team is responsible for all of the major capital projects and state of good repair projects for the railroad right-of-way. Under Senate Bill 1703, in January 1st of 2003, the responsibility for planning, programming, development, and construction was transferred to SANDAG. So SANDAG does all of the major projects for NCTD, but the team of rail engineers has a responsibility of reviewing all of the projects and the plans to ensure that what SANDAG is planning and constructing is going to meet the needs of the operations of NCTD. So they have that oversight and work very closely with SANDAG. In addition to those projects, we do have some NCTD projects that they're responsible for. The bridge management plan to ensure that our bridges are inspected in accordance with regulatory requirements and are repaired and safe for travel. They also, as I mentioned before, have responsibility for oversight of any state of good repair projects. Our maintenance of way department has the responsibility similar to facilities and maintaining our facilities and our buildings and stations, the Maintenance of Way Department has a responsibility for the right-of-way. So the right-of-way that we own and operate on. So that includes, again, from county line down to San Diego, which includes 97.2 track miles along the San Diego subdivision, and the Escondido subdivision, which I failed to mention earlier, is the line that Sprinter operates on and Freight operates on that runs from Oceanside to Escondido. So that's all track miles, and it's a little bit higher than the right-of-way mileage miles that we have, because it takes into consideration all of the double tracking that we have. With all of this work is performed by Bombardier Transportation, and we have oversight of that contract, the work that Bombardier Transportation does. So anything within the right-of-way, and our right-of-way can be anywhere from 50 feet wide to 200 feet wide. So anything within there, any drainage, culverts, vegetation, you name it, that's what Maintenance of Way is responsible for, along with the tracks, of course. And so when situations arise where we have needs for state of good repair and replacement of assets, Maintenance of Way also has responsibility for that. And next slide. Any questions that I can answer about development services? No? Then I will turn it over to our Chief Financial Officer, Yoon Park Lynch. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, board members. I am Yoon Park Lynch, and I am the person responsible for leading the finance division. I will be giving a brief introduction of the different departments that are under my umbrella and the different roles and responsibilities that are fulfilled in each of these departments. The finance division is comprised of 4 departments: financial oversight, accounting, grants, and fair collection. The controller is, as a matter of fact, also directly supervising the accounting and fair collection departments, and the financial oversight and grants department, they report directly to me. Starting with the financial oversight department, NCTD is a recipient of multiple funding sources from the federal, state, local level. And as such, we are required to produce financial reports, and we are also subject to multiple audits. Financial reports have to be prepared in accordance with what's called as GAAP. GAAP is considered general accepted accounting principles. Under those standards, there are financial transactions that have to follow certain accounting guidance, and we have to make sure that our financial records follow such guidance. The financial oversight department is also, we have management analysts that are within this department. They are the bridge between finance division and the multiple operational departments within the district. Our management analysts support both the operating budget process and support the different departments in the management of projects, both mostly from a fiscal standpoint, but they also support in ad hoc projects that deal with financial analysis. NCTD, as a recipient of federal funding sources from the Federal Transit Administration, is also required to report on a monthly and annual basis to the National Transit Database, and we have a senior financial analyst that supports that process. The Financial Oversight Department, we're also responsible for managing our investments to make sure that they funds invested are in accordance with our board policy, and make sure that there's proper controls in place to make sure that there is internal control surrounding the management of cash. In addition to that, we are also responsible for preparing multiple reports. Different agencies, both federal, state, and local level, we are subject to single audits. As a recipient of federal funds in excess of $750,000 a year, we are subject to what's called a single audit. We also have to report to the State Controller's Office reports on the financial reports, on the financial results for the district. We are subject to TDA audits. That's Transportation Development Act. Those are funding sources that are derived from sales taxes, and we have to comply with fare box recovery ratios and multiple financial reports. We also, in addition to that, we are subject to audits directed by SANDAG on the use of Transnet funding. The next department within the finance division is the accounting department. This department handles the multiple financial transactions in which you would typically think about from the accounting standpoint, which deals with accounts payable, accounts receivable, and payroll. This group processes all invoices, all check requests, codes them in the system to either operating accounts, capital accounts, and we also process payments to our vendors on a weekly basis. And we are also responsible for billing permits, licenses that come from the real estate department. We have to bill third parties for shared use agreements on a right-of-way. We also bill multiple social service agencies for past sales. So that's all handled through IR department. Once those monies are received by district, the proper cash application is performed. And we also make proper follow-up on the accounts receivable that are outstanding, working with the different departments, if they are, if monies are owed to the district, to make sure that those monies are collected. In addition to that, the accounting department is also supports the recording and the of all fixed assets that are either purchased or internally created by the district through construction projects. We have to ensure that those assets are properly recorded as far as dollar value, allocation of labor, and make sure that they reflect the funding sources that have funded those specific purchases. The grants department has a wide range of responsibilities. The district receives multiple funding sources, as I mentioned earlier, from different federal, state, local, some even discretionary grants. As such, all these funding sources have requirements from both compliance standpoint and from the reporting standpoint. From a compliance standpoint, the grants department ensures that monies are earmarked and used for the intended purpose. A lot of times there are grants that are very restrictive. Some grants may only allow for the purchase of vehicles. Others may only allow for construction activities on the right-of-way, and others may allow even purchase of vehicle, but even more restricted on vehicles that are zero emission. So we just make sure that all expenditures and all transactions that are charged to the different grants are in accordance with those requirements. And we also have to make sure that we comply with reporting requirements. Most grants require at least a semi-annual report, and then some even on a more frequent basis, like the Federal Transit Administration, the FTA. We have to report both from a financial standpoint, meaning all expenses that have been used up on the different grants, how much retainage amounts are out there, how many disbursements were made, as well provide what's called milestone reports. Those milestone reports give an update to the FTA on the different phases of projects. The FTA is really interested in knowing what's project progress, significant project completed, if there are any projects that are potentially delayed for different reasons. So we, as a grants department, we process at a minimum of about 20 different reports at any given time during the year. The district manages at least 100 capital projects. So with that, we have to make sure that, like I said, funds are properly used and there's accountability on how those funds are being used. We also, the grants department is responsible for developing the capital improvement program. This afternoon, there will be a presentation on our CIP for the next 5 years and the list of projects that have been approved for advancement in the FY22. So I'll be providing more details this afternoon on the CIP process. But again, the grants department has the oversight on the development of the CIP. And finally, our fare collection department. As a public transit agency, the district receives multiple, we have to collect fares from our passengers. Those fares can be either monthly passes, day passes, or single trips. And the avenues from which those fares are collected are multiple. It can either be cash collected at the bus fare boxes, sales transacted at the ticket vending machines, that's called TVMs, as well as cash collected from the transit centers. They are also passes that are purchased by employers to provide to their employees. Those are handled by a regional partner, the Metropolitan Transit System, that's MTS. However, even if they act as the regional agency to administer those passes, we have revenue sharing agreements that we have to abide with. So we perform monthly reconciliations on how revenue is allocated among the agencies. And we also have some cost sharing agreements on how some of the back office costs to support the fare collection process. So again, in fare collection, we deal with collecting all those fares, making sure that we contract out to Armor Services third party to collect those fares from our different TVMs and the transit centers and from the bus yards. But as the finance department, we prepare monthly and daily reconciliations to make sure that any cash collected is reflective of what the system is telling us was collected from passengers. So there's a full reconciliation process to account for all the dollars that come into the district. And finally, the fare collection department, we're currently working on the implementation of a brand new fare system called Pronto. I believe there's a quick brief overview that will be given this afternoon, but that system is expected to be launched sometime in the middle of the spring, early summer of this year. So as in collaboration with MTS and within the district, IT department and finance department we have been partnering with MTS to make sure that implementation goes well for the district. So and finally, I am going to provide an overview of our FY21 operating budget. We are going to start launching the development of our FY22 budget this early. As a matter of fact, we already started the process and we'll come to the board in the middle of the early spring to present our FY22. But I wanted to give an overview, especially for those board members that are new to the district, to provide some visibility on where are the different funding sources that come to the district in order to support operations and how we spend those revenues. As you can see here in this table for fiscal year 2021, our total operating budget was $127 million. This is just operating. It does not include our capital activities. As you can see, the major funding source for operating budget are the federal grants and the local grants. Within the federal grants, these are monies that for the most part are received from the FTA, and they are to be used specifically for preventive maintenance expenses. So preventive maintenance expenses are those expenses that are incurred in order to maintain our assets in a state of good repair. So the FTA allows us to use those dollars, for example, for bridge inspection, for even washing buses, washing our locomotives, for inspection for the plumbing system, for facilities maintenance, for vehicle maintenance. We cannot use any of those funding for other expenses that are not associated with this type of activities. So any other expenditures that the district incurs, for example, for the fuel cost, for insurance cost, professional services that are not related to maintenance activity, those are funded from other sources. Those are fare collections, and the biggest one are local grants. Our local grants, the biggest player within this line item is TDA funding. TDA funding is our funds that come to the district and are directly associated with sales tax collections. So the county as a whole, and obviously the entire state, as taxable sales occur, those monies are managed through the state, and they come back to the county to be allocated between NCTD and MTS as a region. NCTD receives approximately 30% of those sales tax collections, and MTS receives approximately 70%. And then in the smaller scale, but also significant, are Transnet funding. So Transnet is a temporary sales tax that was enacted in the county. That sales tax is, I believe it's going to end in 2048 unless another extension is approved by the taxpayers and the voters in the county. So both of those funding sources are, for the most part, what funds the entire operations for the district. That's about 40% of our total operating budget. And with that, as you can see from the expenditure side, the largest item in the budget are purchase transportation. As Karen mentioned earlier, we contract out to Bombardier NV for the operations and maintenance for our bus operations and the maintenance also as well from the right of way. And that's the biggest line item in the budget. And that comprises approximately 51% of our total operating budget. The next two largest items are professional services and employee salaries, wages, and benefits. Within professional services, the largest items are the facilities maintenance contract and as well as the law enforcement contracts that we have with the San Diego Sheriff's Department and the Oceanside Police Department, Escondido Police Department for security services. So once we roll out the FY22 budget, you should be seeing, in the next few months, on how our operating budget is going to look for next year and the next 5 years. But for the most part, as far as what are our major expenses, will not change significantly, meaning that purchase transportation will continue being the largest item within our budget. So that concludes my presentation. So I am available for any questions. Yep, thank you very much. And now Ryan Cashin, our Chief Technology Officer. Oh, one question.
Ms.
Yeah,
Estes, you have a question?
I just wanted to mention that I saw a question in the chat from Esther Sanchez that would best be answered, I think, by you.
Yeah, the question is, what are auxiliary revenues?
Oh, so auxiliary revenues, the largest item is that NCTD, as the operator and the owner of the right-of-way, we receive reimbursements from Amtrak for the rail service, as well for BNSF for shared use and maintenance agreements. The intent of those revenue is to compensate NCTD for the significant costs associated with maintaining and operating the right-of-way. That could be, there's some capital component in it, and there's also dispatching services. So that line item, for the most part, I would say probably about $10 million of that is related to reimbursements that we receive from Amtrak and BNSF for the use of our right-of-way.
I have a question as well.
All right, Dan, go ahead.
Can you just speak to passenger fares? We've seen a large decline with COVID, so I imagine passenger fares are down quite a bit. How does the balance work out? Is it made up by increasing state grants or local grants? How is it balanced? Thank you.
So for fiscal year 2021, we prepared the budget using certain assumptions. Once we come to our actual numbers, our fare collection is probably going to be lower. We had presumed at the time that we prepared the budget that ridership was going to be gradually recovering around August of 2020, and that didn't really materialize. As you can see, as of today, we are still in the middle of the pandemic. But back in March 2020, last year, the CARES Act was passed. And through that act, NCTD was allocated approximately $95 million for operations. So the gap that we are currently having from both passenger fares and some declines on sales taxes are currently being covered by CARES Act funding.
Okay, can you give a rough approximate amount of how much passenger fares are down from normal times to COVID times on an annual basis?
So I would say that we have slightly recovered some of our ridership. We have also recently reinstated the front boarding on our buses once we complete the installation of the barriers. At the lowest point, our fare collections were down 85 to 90% from prior year levels. With Coaster being the one that's the most impacted. As a matter of fact, Coaster is still being impacted by low ridership, and we're still at 90% down from where we were in prior year. Bus and Sprinter has slightly recovered, but Coaster is still down 90%.
And I think that is indicative of the type of ridership on each. Coaster is much more of a type of rider that has the ability to office from home. So it had a significant impact. I think some of those people also saw empty freeways. So we were competing with the ability to drive more quickly. So I think that's why we're seeing the significant impact on the Coaster. Kelly?
Yes, I had a question. Did you say, or is it true that services like Uber and Lyft that you're using as alternative transportation, is that under purchased transportation, or where do those costs fall?
So we do not contract to Uber or Lyft for purchase transportation. We contract to Bombardier Transportation for the operations and maintenance for the Coaster and Sprinter, and to MV Transportation for the operations for Breeze, Lyft, and Flex service. So that line item that you see in our operating budget is there's some cost in there for the Sorrento Valley Coaster connection, but that's very negligible. That's a connection that we contract with MTS, but there is no Uber or Lyft in our budget. And as a matter of fact, we don't contract with them currently either.
Okay, pardon my confusion, but when I was preparing for the meeting this afternoon, it mentioned eliminating a route and that Uber and Lyft would be an alternative to the iCommute, I think it was called. And that's where my question stems from.
Okay, yeah, but in this operating budget, those costs are not included.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Dan, your hand is back up. Did you have another question?
I did have another question, and we don't have to get the answer right now, but do we have financials on each of the operating divisions, Coaster, Breeze, Sprinter? Can we look at those? And again, we don't have to do that right now, but I just want to know, are those regularly reported on?
Yes, we can provide that information. We track our financial records by mode of service.
Great, thank you.
And it's usually in the consent section of each agenda has reports that give you essentially monthly updates on what's going on. It's not always on the agenda, but the information is generally available. And if you have specific questions, direct them to Matt and he will get you the answers.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, I will be handing the presentation to Ryan Cashin. He's our Chief Technology Officer. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I can't work technology, but my name is Ryan Cashin. I'm the Chief Technology Officer here at North County Transit. I'm here to give you a brief overview of the division and some of the services that we provide throughout the district. First and most importantly, we're here to support all of our users and divisions to make sure that they have the tools and technology that they need to keep operations running smoothly. On top of that, we are specifically in charge of some major systems ourselves. For right now, these systems include the fare collection system right now, which is going through a major, as you mentioned, a major new implementation. Positive Train Control was recently transferred to IT. And then we also manage wholly JD Edwards, the financial system that we use here. As part of our regular duties, IT stuff, we manage both. We're lucky enough to have 2 data centers, one here in Oceanside and one in Escondido, because of the fact that we own the right of way and have fiber connections through all of our locations. We manage the Windows infrastructure. Obviously, it includes email services, database, and Office 365 migration. We do the basic disaster recovery, backups, and virus scans. We manage all of our server infrastructure, our virtual desktop and server infrastructure as well, along with the storage systems that we use here. We manage all of the mobile devices, cell phones, tablets that are used throughout the district, and are entirely in charge of our networks throughout the whole county. Like, as I had mentioned, we're lucky enough to have fiber throughout our right-of-way, which basically puts all of our offices into one large network that we take care of as a whole. With that includes managing the network security and the remote access used to get to these networks. For our divisions, which are basically our main customers in IT, we manage dispatching systems for both rail and bus, the call centers that you've heard mentioned for ADA reservations and customer service. We do a lot of work with real-time information coming live off of the trains, such as arrivals and passenger counts. We help rail maintain the wireless mesh network, which is used on our coaster line. We assist security with the video systems, the surveillance throughout all of our locations, including all of the onboard systems. We're starting to work a little more with the digital signage and newer technologies that are coming out there. For finance, as we said, we manage JD Edwards, but also support them in different tasks that need to get done, plus some of the reporting. Fare collection system, pretty much across the board, but as you mentioned, it is a joint system with MTS. So we manage all of our own equipment and reporting services to gather data from that equipment. We help manage the voice recording systems. We have automatic recording systems that record all of our radio traffic and calls to the security center. We take care of a lot of the voice paging systems throughout the district that include some of the AV systems in different boardrooms, the page out, the public announcement systems at all of our stations. And then recently, we've also been heavily involved in collecting a lot of data throughout the district since we have so many sources and doing the reporting on it as such. So that, I know that's a quick, brief overview of what we do. Basically, IT has their hands in pretty much everything across the board, anything technology related across the different divisions. So if there's any specific questions or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me because we can talk all day about the stuff that IT's got their hands in right now. So with that, if there aren't any questions, I will turn it over to Jennifer Taylor, our Chief Procurement and Contracts Administration Officer, who is joining via Zoom.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the board, and welcome new board members. As Ryan said, my name is Jennifer Taylor, and I'm the Chief Procurement and Contract Administration Officer for the district. Next slide. There we go. The PCA division is responsible for acquiring the products and services necessary to provide and support service throughout the district in accordance with state and local and federal regulations and ordinances, and of course, board policies. We use a variety of templates and tools to ensure fair and open competition, and we also utilize an online bidding system that many of your cities utilize as well, and that is PlanetBid. We work closely with General Counsel to make sure that all of the regulations are adhered to through our templates. And we are here throughout the entire process to assist with contract administration all the way through closeout. Next slide. It's through board policy number 19 that the board has delegated authority to the executive director to award contracts up to $200,000, contract modifications up to $100,000, task orders up to $200,000, and to contract for emergency and exigent circumstances. The Procurement and Contract Administration Policy and Procedure Manual identifies informal bid threshold at $100,000 for materials, goods, equipment, and services, pretty much everything other than public works or construction, which has a threshold of $200,000. And that is because we have adopted, the board has adopted the Uniform Public Construction Cost Accounting Act. Very brief. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Hearing none, I'll turn it back over to Anthony.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is David Blythe. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for BUS. Next slide. So I'm the Chief Operations Officer for BUS, which encompasses all three of our non-rail modes, Breeze, Lift, and Flex. We have one department in our division, and that's Bus Operations and Fleet Maintenance. So our department and division is primarily responsible for the oversight of our bus operations and maintenance contractor, MV. So we've contracted with MV to operate service on all three modes, Breeze, Lift, and Flex. So that includes operators, dispatchers, road supervisors, so on, to maintain the revenue and non-revenue fleets. That's 200 revenue vehicles and almost 100 non-revenue vehicles. And they're also responsible to maintain the facilities that they operate out of. So that's Bus Operations East and Bus Operations West, as well as two bus-only transit centers, the San Luis Rey and Plaza Camino Real. My staff is responsible for performing oversight on MV. So we do that by observing daily operations in the field, observing dispatchers, and looking at the various systems that we have installed on fleet. In addition, we also review maintenance records, perform in-person inspections of vehicles that were recently maintained. We review training records. We also attend training classes and safety meetings in person so that we can audit the material that's being taught and answer any questions that people may have. Our department is also responsible for purchasing new vehicles and managing other capital projects. Speaking of new buses, in the past 24 months, we've ordered 76 new Breeze buses, 40 new Lift vehicles, and 12 new Flex vehicles. We're also responsible for overhauls on major components. One of those would be engines and transmissions. Mostly in the Breeze fleet, it's usually anticipated that each Breeze bus is going to get 2 engine overhauls and 1 transmission overhaul in the life of the vehicle. And then we also have several exciting new zero emissions bus projects that are going on. We have 6 battery electric buses that are expected to arrive in early fall. And we have 8 fuel cell electric buses that are expected to arrive early next fall. And we're working with development services to implement the charging and fueling systems for those buses. In addition to that, our department is also responsible for the paratransit eligibility process. So you heard Karen talk about how her staff is involved with that. We manage that process with the help of her staff, as well as 2 contractors, ADA Ride and CARE Evaluators. So we contract with ADA Ride to actually perform the eligibility determinations for who is eligible to ride paratransit. And then if there is an appeal that comes through, we have an independent third party called CARE Evaluators that looks at that eligibility determination and any other information the customer wants to submit and can either appeal the decision or uphold the decision. In addition, with the help of IT, we perform oversight on 2 of our shared regional technologies, RTMS, or the Regional Transit Management System. That's the radio system that's in use on the Breeze buses. And then the Regional Fare System, which is currently called the Compass Card. And like we said, we're soon switching to the Pronto. We also do oversight on the other technologies we have installed on the fleet, stuff like cameras, fuel monitoring, things like that. And on a parting note, I'd like to point out that this year is also the 45th anniversary of Breeze. And I'm told that marketing is working on activities for later on in the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Damon. I'm Graham Blackwell, the Chief Operations Officer for Rail. Rail Division, we're primarily responsible for the operations, maintenance of the coaster and sprinter service, including signaling and dispatch. The 2 divisions of Rail Coaster is our locomotive-based heavy rail system. We have 7 locomotives, 28 bi-levels. Of those 28, 10 are coach cars. As you know, we're in a commissioning process right now to replace 5 of those locomotives with the new Siemens Charger locomotive, which goes into service February 8th. We're also in the middle of an overhaul program on the coaster bi-levels as well. It's an ambitious program. We're doing 4 bi-levels every year, and that overhaul program should be complete in 2026. On the Sprinter side, we're running our regular service. We have 12 Desert Road DMUs. We're also doing an ambitious overhaul task order program in the middle of the Sprinter program, where we're replacing many key components and systems within the Sprinter units. We also oversee Bombardier, who is our operations and maintenance contractor. We have engineers and conductors on the coaster side, train attendants and train operators on the Sprinter side. In the maintenance facility, it's maintenance facility. And then on the signal side, we oversee the contractor for the operation of the signal network. As part of our dispatch in Escondido, we run the OCC Operating Center. It's the brains of the operation, I like to call it. The director is responsible for the oversight of the supervisors to ensure 24/7, 365 communication and response entirely controlled within the OCC. The OCC is also responsible for all passenger updates through digital messaging signs, PAs, and social media. Any questions for Rail? Okay, thank you. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Oh, I got a question.
There is a question from Board Member Edson.
Sorry, trying to get my video live and my mic. Could you please explain, for the benefit of the new members coming on board, the benefits of the Charger locomotives that are coming on board?
For sure. So the Charger locomotive is a Tier 4 compliant diesel locomotive. It's going to replace the Tier 0. So it's going to be 90 to 95% more efficient for pollution. It's also half as loud, so it's a very quiet locomotive. And it's the reliability and availability. We're expecting to go into service with a 99.9% availability, reliability of the locomotive in service, replacing the much older Chargers, the F40s, which require we're going into a massive overhaul program. So the Chargers will bring us availability, reliability, a quiet service for our customer, as well as greatly reduce emissions for the passengers.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Quirk.
Thank you. With the COVID drop in passengers on the coaster, I've noticed that many of the coaster trains are effectively empty, maybe a handful of people. Did the NCTD ever consider temporarily just suspending the service? It seems a little bit odd to me to run empty trains, but just wondering if there were conversations or if that was ever actually looked at. Thank you.
So in coaster service, we are running a revenue reduced COVID schedule. We normally run 22 trains a day, Monday to Friday. We are currently running 12. As well, we are using that opportunity within the COVID schedule to do the Charger commissioning and testing. It's actually been an opportunity to not have to stretch the crew base, has been able to do that during our regular days to involve the signal testing and the PTC testing as well. As well, we need, before we had the Charger testing trains, we were running sweeper trains out on the property. It's hard to understand, but with metal on metal, the entire network depends on being in operation. That's the signaling system, the crossings, everything is built around being in constant operation. And as well, the qualifications of the crews, engineering, the engineers, the conductors, it was just vital for us to keep the network running.
Okay, maybe just a follow-up. Is there a metric in terms of passengers when you would restore the previous service levels that you had, or is that just to be determined?
That's to be determined. There is no metric right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Anthony? All right, thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Robert Clay, our Chief of Planning, Strategy, and Innovation.
Hello, I'm Robert Kalix, and I'm the Chief of Planning, Strategy, and Innovation. Thank you for the opportunity to spend some time with you to talk a little bit about what we're doing in our newly created division this past year. If you can go on to the next slide, please, Anthony. Yes, we have basically three functions in our division. One is service planning that is led by Kim Tucker, Director of Service Planning, where we look at developing strategies to increase one of our core goals, ridership and revenue growth. And part of this is to be able to schedule the service with Breeze, Coaster, and the Sprinter trains. And to do that effectively, it's dependent on good data. And so one of the primary responsibilities for us is to monitor our performance and to prepare those reports. And we prepare these transit operations performance reports on a monthly basis, as well as what you'll be seeing, a mid-year report, as well as an annual report, to give you an idea how all our modes are comparing to previous performance, but also to current performance. What are we doing to improve our service so that our customers have a good customer experience on all our transit services? And together with that, we have to look to the future, and that's part of the strategic planning and innovation component of what we do. We have to look at the next 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. What are the best practices being taking place across the country, as well as our local peers? And how can we share information with them so that we can then also adapt our performance and provide a better experience for all our customers? So look at short-term and long-term planning horizons. And then we look at how can we improve our best practices? How can we identify a new trend? How can we restructure our service? And one of the things that you'll be seeing shortly as a major update at the board is where are we with our strategic strategic implementation plan in terms of our transit services, in terms of what are we going to be doing in the future in streamlining our bus service that makes it much more frequent. What kind of microtransit flex zones are we going to be developing so that it works hand in hand with how people are now traveling, and also hand in hand with our bus service, connecting really well with our rail program. And we'll also be looking at working with all your cities and developing a work plan. If we're going to increase our frequency of bus service, if we're going to develop these microtransit flex zones, then what needs to happen in the street with each city so that that city and our service are basically working hand in hand to provide that service to the customers. So I'm going to be working together with our team, together with your cities, and jointly with SANDAG and Caltrans to develop those work plans on how best to reconfigure our technology on the streets and the street design so that our service then matches with what your city is planning and doing. So I'm really excited about working on that, and I hope to launch that, if not in March, sometime in April. So we'll be in touch with your staff so that we can work closely with them to develop a very good work plan. And of course, we'll be updating the board on those things. So if we can go on to the next slide, please. Also work with and lead the communications and marketing department. That's led by Kimmy Wall. And of course, another goal is, core goal is to increase ridership and revenue through these proactive communication strategies and public engagement activities. And that takes creative marketing. We're looking to having a performance dashboard on our website so that people can see how our performance is doing in terms of our ridership, in terms of our on-time performance and things like that. All those reports are there right now, but we want to make it much more user-friendly, easier to read, easier to navigate, and we're looking forward to developing that later this year. In addition, our advertising sales, we sell advertising on our buses and trains, and we generate approximately nearly $1.3 million a year. So it's a revenue generation that we have in this department, and we've been very successful at doing that. And that helps us in terms of funding activities for the agency. And the other things that we do is website and social media engagement. We work with the media out there in terms of how best to get the message out there of things that we're doing. And as you all know, on February 8th, we're going to be launching our new coasters. And so we're really excited about that. We've had a lot of pre-launch activities in terms of letting folks know about that event. And then subsequent to that, we're going to have a ridership development program in terms of letting people know that this service is available so that when we get out of this pandemic, we're poised and positioned to engage and inform the communities about what we have and how ready we are to serve them and how ready we are in terms of trusting us with their safety on our buses and trains. And part of that is our community engagement. And one of the things that if you feel there are community-based organizations out there that you think we should be working with, please let us know who they are. And we want to include them in our stakeholder database so that we can inform them and keep them engaged on a monthly, if not a weekly basis. And to do all that effectively, we have a creative and graphics design department within our communications and marketing in terms of making sure that everything that we produce is very appealing and attractive and easy to read for our customers and potential customers that we hope to attract moving forward. If there are any questions, that kind of ends my presentation, and wanted to make it short and sweet, but we're here to serve you moving forward about how best we can appeal to your residents and your businesses in each of your cities. Thank you.
Board Member Quirk.
Thank you. I've spent a good bit of time looking kind of historically at some of the overall ridership numbers. This is really a strategy and planning question. Are there metrics for accountability? And I ask that with my understanding that ridership for the entire system has been in decline since 2013. It was never really that high to begin with. And we've seen gradual declines, for the last 7 or 8 years. And then of course we had COVID. So, what do we do? Do we just continue to do the same thing? Ridership numbers are incredibly low. What's the accountability? What are the metrics that the board needs to be looking at? And is just doing more of the same going to work? We don't need to answer that right now, but it's more of a broad question for my fellow board members.
I'm glad
that's actually something that I'd prefer to just deal with in a board meeting instead of an orientation meeting.
Okay.
So, you've got your, he gave you the heads up, Robert, and it may be something that comes up at a board meeting, and so that every member of the board would have the benefits of the answer, and perhaps it'll come in a situation where we can have some vigorous deliberation about it. So thank you.
And that's part of our strategic multimodal implementation plan that we'll be sharing with you in terms of how are we taking into account the new travel behaviors that customers and people are doing today. We need to adapt. And those are the kind of things that I'm looking forward to presenting with others from our team and moving forward. So thank you for bringing that up, because that's exactly what we need to do, is we need to change what we're offering the public. Thank you.
Board Member Sanchez.
Thank you. And I agree that it ought to be in a more public place where we have that it's noticed so that people can come in and say why they're not using it. I think it might have to do with, I know that in one of our citizens in North County did a whole outreach to try to get a certain route from the back gate area to Maricosta, because a lot of the kids it would take 2 hours to get there. And so they wanted a more direct route, and there were enough of them that it made sense. So I think it's the idea of finding where more people are going to the same place at the same time, that it be as on time as possible, and encouraging people to do it, making it more comfortable, more desirable. Certainly our city, as well as others, I'm sure, are reducing parking and trying to get people to think about the choice of taking public trans. And also this whole idea about shuttles and trying to get places that people would, a lot of people do go to, like say the Hot Tri-City or the mall or the courthouse, and trying to figure out how we can, move folks that would normally want to do that. I have the experience of having a nephew who didn't even want to drive at 18. So he wanted to try the public trans, and then after a while he got tired of spending so much time trying to get to where he wanted to get to. But yes, thank you very much.
Thank you. And we look forward to getting some of that direction, but we want you to know that we're also going to be doing additional survey, because in coming out of this pandemic, we need to understand how are people actually going to, we may have understood it a year ago how people are traveling, but how are people traveling moving forward? And so we're going to be doing some surveying coming up either in March or April, where we can then take that information and figure out how can we adjust the services that we offer. So I'm excited about that, because I think it's important to be able to have the data that you can then base a decision where you're going to invest those resources. And we want to make sure we maximize the use of those resources with good data.
Board Member Von Wilpert.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here. This is the first time the city of San Diego has had a council member on the board. So thank you for welcoming us. And I'm actually a Compass card holder and transit user myself. I was taking the 110 Express bus before the pandemic. So thank you for everything all of you do. I know this is not easy, and I appreciate you going through the pandemic with everybody. But I've got a question about, in terms of planning, strategy, and innovation, how we're plugging into, the county's going to have a new climate action plan coming up, and we have climate action goals. So I'd love to hear about that.
Yes, well, one of the things that we've been monitoring, even though there is a pandemic and we haven't been able to do certain things, one thing that our CEO has made sure we do is that we engage with our regional partners, our city partners, so that when we do come out of this pandemic, we know how to get out of this and be able to appeal to folks better to attract them. And one of the things that we have to make sure is that we comply with those air quality standards that we all have to comply with in terms of transportation. And to be able to do that effectively that's why we're looking at electrification. I think Damon mentioned that we're starting that. And that's just one element of it. You also heard Graham talk about the coasters being much more efficient. The air emissions are so much lower than they were with our older trains. So those are the kinds of things that we have to do. And as much as each one is incremental, when you put them all into an aggregate, they're making an impact. But we need to continue to move forward with that. And that's why we work closely with SANDAG and working closely with the air quality district so that we can make sure we are achieving the goals that they expect us to achieve through the investments. And that's going to require investment also from our strategic funding partners, because there's only so much we can do with the budget that we have. And that's why our CEO has especially given us the direction for this division to be looking at how can we improve the data that we have, not just know what happened, but also what should we be doing with this information? What should we be doing with what we're learning from what happened? And not only that, is there a predictive capability from this data in moving forward to help us make those adjustments now so we're ready for when those predictive events take place in the future? So those are the kind of things that I'm excited on working on. And I look forward to sharing these things with you moving forward.
Marnie, it's great to have you on board. I'm sure you're aware that your Mayor Gloria, when he was assemblyman, represented some key people down by the depot. And there was a lot of activity surrounding the maintenance of the Pacific Surfliner down at the depot. And we haven't heard from that group in a long time. I don't know if you've had a chance to meet them and understand their concerns, but there's a lot of work that's coming through this project where we're going to build the platform at the convention center and extend into a maintenance facility down further south in the BNSF yard. So there's a lot happening in your neck of the woods. And so it's good to have you here with us.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Tony, I'd love to hop on the phone with you and give me your background and anyone you think I should meet with and talk to. And of course, our mayor is telling me the same thing. So, but thanks for having me. Thanks for your leadership.
Thanks. And it looks like Sean Lufborough is queued up next. Is that correct?
He's our Chief of Safety. Yes. Take it away, Sean.
That is correct. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Again, welcome to NCTD. I am Sean Lufborough, the Chief of Safety, and I'll provide a brief overview of the responsibilities of my division. So though I only have 5 employees, so I have a small size, but we do have a large responsibility to make sure that all staff and contractors are following all the appropriate rules as required. That can come in various forms on the federal side through the Code of Federal Regulations for both the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration, as well as the FRA, the Federal Railroad Administration. On the state side through the CPUC, California Public Utilities Commission oversight, they provide general orders for us that provide the framework, again, to support our mission statement to deliver safe, reliable, user-friendly public transportation services. The other 4 of my division are the safety specialists. I have one really for each sort of functional area. I have a bus safety specialist. I have one for rail, a field safety specialist, which focuses on projects and construction throughout the district. And then finally, a system safety and compliance inspector. That person is my lead auditor excuse me, as well as my database manager to make sure that we're tracking and trending all the relevant safety information. Again, the key responsibilities that we do have is the regulatory compliance that I alluded to earlier, making sure we have the appropriate safety plans. There are rules for the safety plans, both on the FTA and the FRA side, and we want to make sure that we're compliant for both of those. I execute an internal safety and security audit program, so I do audit other NCTD departments and divisions, as well as both contractors on the rail, bus, and facility side to make sure that they are compliant with all appropriate regulations, again, supporting our mission statement. I also lead the risk register meetings, which is a formal meeting to discuss efficient and effective operations and to highlight any potential risks at the agency that need to be mitigated or eliminated to the lowest level practical. I also am responsible for the hazard management program. Our safety plans are based on the safety management system principles, which is based on a top-down data-driven approach to mitigate and eliminate hazards. We want to deal with those hazards while they're small before they become something more significant, such as an accident or injury or potential property damage. Additionally, I'm also leading the team as far as the response for COVID-19 for the district. I'll be providing a update later on this afternoon as part of the board meeting as far as the district's response to COVID-19 and some of the protocols that we've put in place on the operational and safety side to make sure that our customers, employees, and the public at large remain safe during this pandemic. Pending any questions, that's all I have. Okay, without any further ado, I'm going to now pass it off to Lori Winfrey, who is our general counsel.
So good afternoon, Chairman Kranz and members of the board. I first want to welcome all of our new board members and alternates who have been newly appointed. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. As Karen Tucholsky mentioned earlier at the beginning of this presentation, my position is one of two positions that report directly to the board of directors here at NCTD. The other position obviously is the executive director, and he's responsible for the everyday, day-to-day operations of the district in compliance with the board's direction. And I'm responsible for ensuring that the transactions of the district and the initiatives of the board are compliant with all of our various regulations, laws, board policies and ordinances, and that we are in compliance with our funding grant agreements. So under the umbrella of the Office of General Counsel, we have a total of 5 employees being led by myself. But in addition to the Office of General Counsel, I'm also responsible for overseeing the Procurement and Contract Administration Division. You've met Jennifer Taylor a bit earlier today, and she mentioned to you all of the activities that the district is responsible for and the regulation related to procurement, and so I oversee that as well. So my general responsibilities to the district, besides sitting with the board here in our regular meetings, our committee meetings, and our closed sessions, is to represent the district in all legal matters. I manage and oversee all of the litigation and claims matters that we receive here at the district and work toward disposition and resolution on those. I'm also, I guess, considered the chief compliance officer here at the district, responsible for overseeing our comprehensive compliance and oversight program and the internal audit program, which I'll speak a little bit more about here in just a moment. I also am responsible for drafting, negotiating, and ensuring that all of the contracts, leases, and other agreements that we enter into here at the district are compliant with all of the various laws and regulations, board policy, and that they serve the best interest of the district. I do advise all of the divisions. You've met all of the division chiefs here today. I do advise all of divisions and departments here at the district on all legal matters. I pretty much look at every document and transaction that the district is responsible for implementing, including all matters related to human resources, employment matters, and personnel matters. Everything that comes to the board for consideration here, whether it be in closed session or a regular meeting of the board or a committee meeting of the board, I have reviewed with the executive director prior to it being placed on the agenda. So in terms of the composition of the Office of General Counsel, other than myself, we do have a senior legal counsel, and you will hear from him after this presentation. He's going to go over the governance of the board and overview of various documents that govern the board's actions, such as ordinances, board policies, and so forth. He is also primarily responsible for our environmental and stormwater compliance programs here at the district. And he also oversees the risk management function, which is through our legal coordinator of claims. The legal coordinator is responsible for the receipt and disposition of all government claims and is also responsible for the liability insurance and property insurance programs at the district, which is a fairly significant program for the district due to our rail liability program. We also have a compliance officer here at the district, and she's responsible for implementing the comprehensive compliance and oversight program. And that's a very important program to the district because it is tied into our Federal Transit Administration grant funding. And that program on a rolling triennial basis reviews all of the subject matter areas and audits those areas that are being audited through the Federal Transit Administration. Additionally, it also audits the two modal contracts, so the Bombardier contract on the rail side and the MV Transportation contract on the bus side, which you've heard from other chiefs here today about. The internal audit program is focused primarily on the financial transactions of the district through the finance division and the procurement division. And that program is, it's a program that we work through a charter through the PAF committee, the Performance Administration and Finance Committee, to develop a work plan on an annual basis and decide what should be audited on an annual basis. In addition to that, we do have a civil rights officer here at the district under the Office of General Counsel. And the civil rights officer is responsible for the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program, the EEO program, the Title VI program, and the Labor Compliance Program. And through that position, we also work toward compliance in all of those areas as they relate to our Federal Transit Administration funding and through state law under the UNRRA program. That position also serves as an EEO investigator on behalf of the district with a dotted line reporting responsibility to the Chief Administration Officer, who is the EEO officer for the district, and also is the district's disadvantaged business enterprise liaison officer with a direct line reporting to the executive director as required by the Federal Transit Administration as it relates to ensuring disadvantaged businesses have an opportunity to compete at the district. That's the general overview of the Office of General Counsel. As Karen mentioned, I do report directly to the Board of Directors, and I am employed here by way of an employment agreement that is negotiated with the Board of Directors. With that, I'll take any questions.
I would like to point out that her hiring came a little bit after I first started serving, and we had contract attorney with Best and Krieger, and the difference between having a full-time general counsel has just made a tremendous difference. And so we're very fortunate to have her in that position. Our FTA, the triennial audits, the improvements that we've seen in that alone are pretty critical. And as you can tell by her presentation there, with all the federal funding and state funding that we get, compliance is pretty critical. So we're lucky to have her.
Thank you, Tony.
I had a question.
Kelly.
Thank you. Can you tell me who it is that handles the, would it be the civil rights officer who handles issues related to passengers who are disadvantaged or possibly disenfranchised, or whose office is that with?
So typically that would come in, it generally will come in either through the customer service department and then transferred over to my office, for review and consideration, or it will come in directly through, we have on the website link directly to the Title VI officer, which would then come directly into the Office of General Counsel. But in terms of the disposition related to those complaints, they would be directly through the Office of General Counsel.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you very much. I look forward to working with you all.
Is Jacob next, or are we having? Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right. Good afternoon. My name is Jacob Gould, Senior Legal Counsel. I'm going to be going through the overview of agency governance as well as our board policies. Some of this you'll have seen before in some of these other presentations, so I'll skip through this. Our inaction in 1975, our name change. Our enabling legislation is located within Public Utilities Code 125,000, and all authority for the district originates with you, the board of directors. Powers and duties are enumerated therein. Basically, our operations and maintenance of public transit system, adopt a budget, adopt an administrative code, which we have through ordinances and policies, and then our audits, appointments of committees, and then anything else necessary to carry out that purpose. This is sort of the brief overview of our enabling legislation. We are a special district under the state of California, so we are also subject to many laws and regulations. This very small book here is our cliff notes on all the regulations we are subject to in the state of California. Does not include the federal regulations, some of which have been gone through. And we are a Brown Act board, so all of our meetings such as this are held in public with advanced notice. Briefly touched on 1703 through some of the other presentations, but this really modified the way that NCTD implements projects. In 2003, 1703 transferred future planning, programming, development, and construction from NCTD to SANDAG for projects within our jurisdiction. And it also required us to continue to operate all of our modes, implement local and minor capital improvement projects through you, the NCTD Board of Directors. Through this, NCTD is really the owner, operator, and maintainer of the system, with few exceptions in South County. And SANDAG is the region's metropolitan planning organization, what you'll hear us refer to as in the MPO, or the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. SANDAG is required to implement the regional plans. You've seen these before as the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or RTIP. This covers basically their 5-year CIP program. It's a multi-year program, and it's included all of the major highway, arterial transit, rail and bike projects, including all the Transnet program projects. This is where many of the capital improvement projects originate and are funded, and we do work closely with SANDAG to make sure that our CIP program in terms of capacity enhancement and regional planning is incorporated within the RTIP. SANDAG also implements all of our transit construction projects within the region pursuant to 1703, so long as they are not local and minor. This includes all the double track projects you've seen, crossing enhancements, platform updates, and things like that. Those are all done under SANDAG's jurisdiction per 1703 through an agreement that we have entered into. It originated with what we term the master MOU. And every time we had a project, NCTD and SANDAG would have to negotiate an addendum to that master MOU. So several years ago, NCTD and SANDAG entered into what we call Addendum 18. And this basically covered all of our capacity enhancement as well as local and minor capital improvement projects under mutual agreement to SANDAG. There was a standard form, which is implemented on a project by project basis. And this form was attached and agreed to by the parties as Exhibit A. You'll hear this term quite often when looking at our budget as well as our capital improvement program and project implementation. We'll let you know that this project is an Exhibit A project, and this is the reference that staff is making. Moving on to NCTD's regulation, we do have our own police power. We implement what we term the laws of the district. We have two ways of doing that. The first is through adoption of ordinances. Ordinances are just like the ordinances at your city. They apply throughout the district. They cannot be waived even by the board. They must be amended or rescinded by a majority vote of the board. And they do require the adoption of amendment by a new ordinance in order to change. So it's not a one-off waiver or anything like that. We currently have 4 ordinances in place. Ordinance 1 and 2 have both been rescinded and incorporated into the other portions that we have. Ordinance 3 establishes our rules and regulations, authorizes arrest and citation for violation of NCTD ordinances. Most of that enforcement is currently handled by our law enforcement agencies that we have contracted with. We have our roaming law enforcement force, which is our sheriff's unit. And then we have agreements in place with Escondido Police Department as well as Oceanside Police Department for our 2 major transit hubs. Ordinance 4 establishes a personal merit system and delegates the day-to-day employee matters to the executive director, except for the 2 direct reports. Ordinance 5 regulates parking within NCTD parking lots. This one has been modified several times over the last couple of years. We have recently implemented new parking rules to better allow our parking lots to serve our transit patrons. And we have discussed further parking regulations as soon as the COVID and pandemic restrictions are lifted. We anticipate our parking lots to be in higher demand, and so we will be implementing that soon. Ordinance 6 finally establishes the informal bidding procedures. Many of your cities may have adopted similar ordinances under the Uniform Public Cost Construction Accounting Act. We call it the alphabet soup. But this basically allows for higher limits on formal bids and allows for alternative bidding procedures under that threshold, generally $200,000 for public works. This has allowed us to streamline projects. As you can imagine, anything having to do with bus or rail lines gets very expensive very quickly. And so a $10,000 limit for bid was highly restrictive. I'm not really going to go through too much on the board of directors direct reports. Those have both been handled. But as mentioned before, the executive director and general counsel are both hired and report directly to the board. Primary responsibilities of the executive director is sole authority to supervise all district staff, basically top of the org chart for the rest of us here. Short-term and long-term goals for the district, community relations outreach, managing contracts, and the rest of the day-to-day business. The executive director does have the only delegation of authority from the board, and that is found within board policy number 19. The general primary responsibilities included within that document are representing the district in contracts. We have a $200,000 authorization limit there, $100,000 for renewal or cumulative contracts, the day-to-day business and things like that. Within the general counsel's primary responsibilities, as touched on before, the general counsel is the primary legal representative for the district. And I won't go over that again since we just had that one. Let's see. Getting into the board policies, this is the second way that NCTD can implement its police power. The executive director and general counsel assist the board in development of all these policies and the day-to-day implementation thereof. The first board policies were adopted in 2012, and we've done annual updates in October, November timeframe every year after. The difference between an ordinance and a policy is while the ordinance does take a majority vote to amend and it has to be formal, a policy can be waived by a majority vote on a case-by-case basis. Currently, we have 34 board policies in place. I'm going to go through them very, very briefly. I am going to touch on some of the ones that are either more often used or stand out. But if there are any questions on any of the policies that we go forward, you're always free to reach out. The general provisions in Board Policy 1 establishes the purpose and procedures for implementation of board policies. It's sort of the policy on how the policies work. Policy number 2 is the appointment of the board of directors. So this establishes the appointment process for the board chair and vice chair. And board policy 3 establishes similar procedures for the appointment process to both internal and external committees. As was mentioned before, we have 3 internal committees: the executive, MISPDA, or the Marketing, Service Planning, and Business Development, as well as PAF, which is the Performance Administration and Finance. I think we've reviewed most of these, so I'll go through that very quickly. Board policy number 4 is the rules and procedures for the conduct of board meetings. So basically the way that our board meetings are handled, notices and things like that are held within board policy number 4. Board policy number 5 has public notices and participation. This is how service changes, adoption, modification of ordinances, how all these things are implemented, and how notice to the public is provided. Board policy number 6 is our ethics training policy. This establishes the requirements for the state imposed Assembly Bill 1234 training. I'm sure most of you have had that already. If you haven't, you shortly will through your cities. On the rare occasion that either because of timing or adoption, where 1234 training has not been provided by the cities, we have provided that here at the district, but typically we rely on you getting that through your direct elected appointment. Board policy number 7 establishes our compensation and travel expense reimbursement process. Board policy number 8 is a big one for review. This is our conflict of interest code. This is required by California state law, is also intended to comply with the FTA guidelines, or 4220.1. This is the way we spend FTA money. Both of these laws are wrapped into our conflict of interest code and are reflected on their disclosure agreements that designated staff as well as our elected officials fill out. You'll see those as part of your SEI, your Statement of Economic Interest, or what's known as a Form 700. Board policy number 9 is our investment policy. Establishes the policy to protect our investments principles and ensure compliance and meet all our financial needs. Yoon is much more qualified to go over this, so I just mentioned it here. Board policy 10, again, applies with our finance arm. This is our reserve funds, a targeted balance of $15 million in reserve, and this allows us to get through times like these. Board policy 11 is our real estate policy, which establishes our property management goals, disposal, acquisition, and incidental use of real property processes. So this is the way that we can buy, sell, or lend or lease our property to third parties. Board policy 12 is specific to our excess property utilization plan, and this specifically establishes a disposition policy for our FTA funded real property. So as mentioned before, in addition to state law, we have federal law regulations where we acquire land or equipment or anything else where we use FTA money. We have to report back to them on either the disposition or destruction of that asset. So this is for real property. Board policy 13 is our advertising, concessions, and merchandising policy. This establishes the guidelines for all of our advertising, concessions, and merchandising that we have. So you've seen the train wraps, bus wraps, you've seen some of the concession stands that we've had at our stations. This policy entails all of that, as well as sort of our review of those advertisements in a First Amendment light. Board policy number 4 is our record management and document control policy. This ties in with board policy 15, which is our records retention policy. So both of these work together to maintain our records and our document management, make sure that those are open for review for the public, and so that we can keep track of things here at the district. As you've heard, we have many hands in the jar. Board policy number 16 is our public records request. This establishes the district policy on receipt and response to public records. This basically implements state law. We are required to respond to a public records request within 10 days. If it meets certain requirements, we can request an extension, but we do our absolute best to get back within that initial period. Board policy number 17 is budget development. This basically establishes the process for developing the budget and monitoring those budget controls. Board policy 18 is of keen interest to many of our coastal cities, as this establishes our rail crossing quiet zone and wayside horn policy. This establishes our base terms that the board has implemented that we effectuate through our MOUs and our easements with our neighboring cities for quiet zone implementation. As I mentioned, Board Policy 19, the delegation of authority. I went through most of these already, but the takeaway here is if the authority has not been delegated to the executive director through this Board Policy 19, it does take an action of the board to implement or carry out. So you will see the matters that are not included within Board Policy 19 come before you basically for first impression and approval. Those items that are within Board Policy 19 may be approved by the executive director and are from time to time brought to the board because of either extenuating circumstances or it's of particular interest or anything like that. Complementary transit passes. This is implemented through Board Policy 19. Generally, we use these as a marketing tool. We have a lot of outreach to our local education facilities, as well as to improve customer satisfaction. So customer service utilizes this on a regular basis. Complementary ADA paratransit program. This implements our paratransit operations in accordance with ADA law, outlines the service area, trip length, and all of those details. And then Board Policy number 22 for service requests establishes the process for evaluating additional service requests from Board Policy 23, Railroad Construction Schedule. This one is always of interest. This establishes the principles and procedures for managing rail construction projects along the right-of-way. You'll hear the term absolute work window or AWW, where we shut down the railroad for a time. Generally, these are on the weekends. This is the policy that implements that. Because of the impacts not only to our commuter line, but as well as the freight schedule, these are scheduled at the beginning of the year, but a minimum generally of 6 months in advance. Unless there's exigent circumstances or an emergency nature, we really try not to shut down the railroad all that often. This policy implements what's required to do that and how it is carried out. Board Policy number 24 is the Employee Drug and Alcohol Policy. So we do have federal regulations that implement this requirement under the DOT and FTA. And this extends to certain non-designated members under both of those regulations that the district has found meet certain criteria needs, either as in a safety or operational capacity. And so those designated employees will be found within this listing here. And then Board Policy 25, you heard about our DBE program, or a disadvantaged business enterprise. This policy ensures that DBEs have an equal opportunity to participate in district contracts, and our civil rights officer works to implement this policy here. Similarly, the discrimination complaint procedure in 26, equal employment opportunity in 27, and fraud prevention within 28 are all housed under that same umbrella. Really, all of these protections and preventions are there for the equal protection of not only the employees, but as well as our patrons and the general public. Asset management policy under 29 establishes the guidelines for distinguishing capital and operating assets and management of the tangible property. So this ties in somewhat with the real property under Board Policy number 12, but this is really looking at goods or equipment that we have on hand and management of that asset list. Board Policy number 30 is threshold for major service change. This defines how we modify our configuration and daily trips or eliminate a route on any of our services. This also implements Title VI analysis and our public hearing requirements for those changes as well. Board Policy 31 is our threshold for disparate impact on minority populations. Again, this ties in with our civil rights officer and his oversight. This defines the thresholds for adverse impacts for major service and where that impact is 10% or more on an average minority population. We have to review this in greater detail. And so this policy outlines the way in which that's done and the requirements for that analysis. Similarly, we have a policy number 32 on low income populations, so very similar to 31 analysis and the thresholds for that. Board Policy number 33, you're hearing a lot of that lately. This is the joint use and development of real property. This is relatively new and is established policy for the joint use of real property and the district's development goals. So we have two that we've been working on for a number of years, Oceanside Transit Center and Solana Beach Transit Center. This Board Policy number 33 dictates how those projects are let to the public and our development objectives are outlined therein. And then board policy number 34 is unsolicited proposals. This doesn't apply all that often, but we've had several requests a couple of years ago when we started our TOD project submittals. And this basically provides a high-level policy and a procedural guideline for responding to unsolicited proposals or partnership requests. And an unsolicited proposal or an unsolicited offer is basically where the district does not have a proposal on the street that doesn't have an RFP or a bid, but a member of the public or a entity wants to come and say, hey, I would like to propose that we do business in this way. That's the gist of an unsolicited proposal, and this policy defines how we respond to that. So I know it's a little bit of a whirlwind to get through all of these. Typically, this is in a face-to-face fashion, and so there's a lot more back and forth. But hopefully you got the gist of our policies. Again, if there's any questions on this, happy to answer them here. But as you go through these and get more acquainted with them, we're always available for questions. So thank you for your time.
I don't see any raised hands, but I would encourage everybody to get familiar with those policies, especially if you saw one that was of interest to you, because you know, they're pretty key. When NCTD hired Mr. Tucker, there were no board policies, and it was one of the things that he's been implementing. There have been a number of changes to the board policies. We look at board policies annually to see if they need to be tweaked, and some of the changes are substantial and others are pretty minor. So it's something that the executive committee generally handles first, and then for the implementation of potential changes that would come back to the full board. So all those policies are pretty important. Anthony, have you briefed everybody on the paperwork part of this job?
Yes, sir. I'll be sending out. I did request a W-9 so board members and board alternates can be compensated. I'll also send out additional information as far as the green sheets, our compensation sheets, sir.
Yeah, the compensation sheets usually are at our desk when we arrive at the meetings. So because we're in the Zoom diggity world, we have to do things a little different. But Anthony is your go-to person, and Anthony, will there be updated telephone business cards put out?
Yes, sir. Specifically to NCTD staff, chiefs, I am putting together the board member information binder. So you may remember we're in the process of updating that. Once that is complete, we'll send it out to print and distribute to all board members and alternates.
Okay, thank you. I do not see any other hands up. The one thing I would mention, the board members do have opportunities for educational conference attendance, etc. I've always attended the Railvolution conference, which I found to be very informative and helpful. There are others through the American Public Transportation Association. Obviously, during the pandemic, conferences they've been held virtually, so it's a bit different, but those opportunities are available for both primary board members as well as alternates. So if you see something of interest, get in touch with Mr. Tucker and have a conversation about that. So I guess that wraps this up. We will be adjourned. See you all again at 2 p.m. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.